The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any species. It stretched for miles in every direction, filled with floating platforms where representatives from 847 alien civilizations sat in judgment. Light from 1,000 different suns poured through crystal windows, casting rainbow shadows across the ancient stone floor. Ambassador stood alone on the human platform. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but she held herself straight as she waited for the vote that would decide humanity's fate. Around her, creatures of every shape and size watched with curiosity, boredom, or open contempt. The High Speaker floated at the center of the chamber on his ceremonial throne. He was an ancient being, his body wrapped in robes of living light, his face hidden behind a mask that had not been removed in 400 years. When he spoke, his voice echoed through translation devices in every language known to exist. "The vote is complete," he announced. 847 species have considered humanity's request for permanent membership in the Galactic Council. The result is unanimous. Already knew what he would say. This was the 15th time humanity had requested membership. The answer had always been the same. Request. A ripple of satisfaction passed through the chamber. Several alien delegates made sounds that might have been laughter, remained perfectly still, her face showing nothing. "The Council recognizes humanity's contributions," the High Speaker continued, his mandibles clicking beneath his mask. "Your species has served admirably as peacekeepers, emergency responders, and mediators. However, the Council has determined that humans lack the evolutionary refinement necessary for true governance. Your species is simply too young, too emotional, and too unpredictable for such responsibility." He paused and could hear the smugness in his next words. "Perhaps in another 1,000 years, you may apply again." Took a slow breath. She thought about the 300 years since humanity had first joined the galactic community. She thought about the countless times human ships had rushed into danger to save alien worlds. She thought about the human doctors who had cured plagues on planets whose people would not even shake their hands. She thought about the human soldiers who had died protecting species that called them primitives. And she thought about her orders from Earth. "The United Human Confederacy thanks the Council for its clarity," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. "We have received your answer. Now we ask that you receive ours." The chamber fell silent. This was not the usual response. Usually, the human ambassador would bow politely and promise to try again next century. Usually, humans accepted their rejection with grace and returned to their duties without complaint. Reached into her pocket and removed a small crystal cube. She placed it on the podium before her, and it began to glow with soft blue light. "This device contains a formal notice of withdrawal, as required by galactic law. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from all treaties, protectorates, and mutual defense agreements with the Galactic Council. We surrender all claims to territory outside our home systems. We recall all human personnel from Council space." The silence shattered into chaos. Hundreds of alien voices screamed questions, demands, and protests. The ambassador's skin flashed through every color of panic. The Meridian delegate rose on its mechanical legs, shouting about trade agreements. Even species that had voted against humanity with enthusiasm were suddenly demanding explanations. The High Speaker raised one withered hand, and the chamber fell silent again. "Ambassador," he said slowly, "you cannot be serious. Your species has obligations throughout the galaxy. The Outer Rim depends on your patrol fleets. The medical stations in the cluster are staffed entirely by human doctors. You provide emergency response services to over 300 worlds." Nodded. "Yes, we do. We have done so for 3 centuries, asking nothing in return except to be treated as equals." She smiled, and there was no anger in it, only a deep and weary peace. "You have made it clear that equality is not something we can earn through service, so we will stop serving." "This is blackmail," someone shouted from the upper platforms. "No," said, "blackmail would be threatening to leave unless you give us what we want. We are not threatening. We are leaving. We want nothing from you anymore." The High Speaker leaned forward on his throne. "And what of the beings who depend on you? Will you abandon them to satisfy your pride?" His eyes hardened for just a moment. "We did not abandon them. You voted 847 times to tell us that we are not worthy of standing beside you. You told us that our service means nothing. You told us that 300 years of sacrifice earns us nothing but contempt." She gestured to the glowing cube. "We are simply believing you." She stepped away from the podium and began walking toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the stunned silence. "Wait!" The ambassador scrambled down from their platform, their tentacles waving frantically. "You must reconsider. The Scourge Nebula incursions have increased by 40% this year alone, without your battle fleets. Train your own soldiers," said without stopping. "The diplomatic crisis between the hegemony and the concordat. Resolve it yourselves." The plague on 7. Stopped, she turned to face the ambassador, and for a moment her mask of calm slipped. Beneath it was something that looked almost like grief. "The plague on 7 could have been cured 6 months ago," she said quietly. "We requested permission to deploy a medical team. Your government refused because you did not want primitive humans touching your citizens. 80,000 people died while the council debated whether human doctors were qualified to save them." The ambassador had no response. Turned back toward the door. When she reached it, she paused one final time. "We came to the stars hopping to find friends," she said. "We found masters who called themselves allies. We found civilizations so ancient they had forgotten what compassion means. We found a galaxy that took everything we offered and gave us nothing but scorn in return." She looked back at the chamber, at the 847 species who had judged humanity unworthy. "We wish you well," she said. "We truly do, but we are done begging for scraps from your table. Whatever happens next, you will face it without us." The doors closed behind her. The High Speaker sat in silence for a long moment. Around him, the chamber buzzed with confusion and anger and fear. But beneath his mask, in the privacy of his own thoughts, he felt something he had not felt in centuries. Doubt. The humans had always come back before. They had always accepted rejection with a smile and returned to their duties. They had always been there when the galaxy needed them. What would happen now that they were gone? He did not know, and for the first time in 400 years, that uncertainty frightened him. 6 months passed, and the galaxy began to fall apart. Commander X stood on the bridge of his warship, staring at the emergency beacon that blinked red on his display screen. The message was simple and desperate. Atmospheric processor failure on Colony 9. Population 2.3 million, estimated time until total collapse, 4 days. In the old days, before the humans left, this would not have been his problem. A human engineering ship would already be racing toward the colony at maximum speed. Human crews were famous for their speed, their skill, and their strange willingness to risk their lives for strangers. They would arrive within hours, work without sleep for days, and save everyone without asking for payment or thanks. But the humans were gone. "Contact the nearest repair fleet," X ordered, his voice heavy with resignation. His communications officer checked her screens twice before answering. Her scales had turned the pale gray of fear. "Commander, the nearest non-human repair fleet is the Meridian Technical Corps. They are currently stationed at Waypoint 7. "How long to reach the colony?" 72 days, sir, at maximum speed." X closed his eyes. 72 days. The colony would be dead in 4. "What about the human station?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "The one in Sector 9. "Relocated, Commander. all human assets in this region to their home territories 3 months ago. The station is empty. X watched the beacon blink. Each flash represented a life that would end because help could not arrive in time. He thought about the families on that colony, the children who would never grow up, the elders who would die far from there. He thought about how easy it had been to vote against the humans. "Send the distress call to all available ships," he said finally. "Perhaps someone closer will respond." No one did. Colony 9 died 8 days later. The atmospheric processor exploded on the 6th day, and the remaining survivors suffocated slowly as their air turned to poison. The last transmission from the surface was a mother singing to her children, trying to keep them calm as the end approached. X kept that recording. He played it for himself sometimes late at night when he needed to remember the cost of pride. Across the galaxy, similar tragedies unfolded. The trade routes through the corridor had always been dangerous. Pirates and raiders lurked in the asteroid fields, waiting to prey on merchant ships. For 200 years, human escort fleets had patrolled those routes, keeping them safe for commerce. The pirates had learned to fear human ships, with their advanced weapons and their crews who fought with terrifying determination. Now the escort fleets were gone. Within 3 months, shipping through the corridor dropped by 60%. Merchant captains refused to risk the journey without protection. Worlds that depended on trade began to starve. The pirates grew bold and wealthy, taking whatever they wanted from whoever was foolish enough to travel without protection. The Council ordered the Meridian Hegemony to provide replacement patrols. The Hegemony refused, claiming they needed their ships for their own defense. The Concordat offered to help, but their ships were too slow and their crews too inexperienced. 2 patrol vessels were destroyed in their first week of service. The diplomatic crises were even worse. For centuries, humans had served as mediators in disputes between alien species. They had a gift for understanding different perspectives, for finding compromises that satisfied everyone. They were patient listeners and creative problem solvers. Most importantly, they had no territorial ambitions of their own, which made them trusted by all sides. Without human mediators, old conflicts erupted into new wars. The border dispute between the hegemony and the Concordat, which humans had managed peacefully for decades, exploded into open warfare. 3 systems changed hands in the first month. Millions of soldiers died in battles that could have been prevented by a single human diplomat with a pot of coffee and enough patience to let both sides talk. And then there was the Scourge. The Scourge was a machine intelligence, born in the dark spaces between stars. No one knew where it came from or what it wanted. It simply arrived, consumed everything in its path, and moved on. Its ships were black and angular, bristling with weapons that adapted to any defense. Its armies were endless swarms of metal insects that devoured organic life without mercy. For 50 years, the humans had held the Scourge at bay. Their fleets had formed a living wall along the Scourge border, fighting constant small battles to prevent a full invasion. It was dangerous work, and many humans had died doing it. But they had never complained, never asked for reinforcements from species who were happy to let someone else do the dying. Now the wall was gone. The Scourge began testing the old boundaries within weeks of humanity's departure. Small probing attacks at first, then larger raids. Without human ships to drive them back, the machines grew confident. They pushed deeper into civilized space, taking systems that had been safe for generations. The Council called emergency sessions to address the crisis. The High Speaker demanded that member species contribute ships and soldiers to form a new defense line. But every species had reasons why they could not spare the resources. Every species pointed fingers at their neighbors. Every species waited for someone else to solve the problem. In his private chambers, the High Speaker read reports of the growing disasters, trade routes collapsing, colonies dying, wars spreading, the Scourge advancing. And everywhere the same question: where are the humans? He pulled up humanity's service record from the Council archives. The numbers were staggering. In 300 years, humans had responded to over 40,000 emergency calls. They had saved an estimated 6 billion lives. They had fought in 217 conflicts on behalf of other species. They had donated medical technology, shared agricultural techniques, and trained countless alien engineers and doctors. They had asked for one thing in return: to be treated as equals. The council had refused them 15 times. The High Speaker set down the report and stared at the wall of his chamber. He was old, older than most beings in the galaxy. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had witnessed the birth of stars and the death of worlds. He had always believed that the ancient species like his own were the rightful rulers of the galaxy, and that younger races like humanity were meant to serve. Now he wondered if he had been wrong. A message arrived from the ambassador requesting an emergency meeting. The Scourge had taken another system, this one only 3 jumps from space. The ambassador was terrified. The High Speaker read the message and felt something cold settle in his chest. It was fear, he realized. Real fear, the kind he had not felt in centuries. The humans were not coming back. The galaxy would have to save itself. And he was no longer certain that it could. 1 year after humanity's departure, the Scourge came from Meridian Station. Meridian was the largest space station in the galaxy. It hung in the void between 3 major trade routes, a shining city of metal and glass that stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction. 12 million beings lived there, representing every species in the Council. It was a place of commerce and culture, of diplomacy and dreams. It was supposed to be invulnerable. The station's defensive grid had been designed by 17 species working together. Its shields could withstand the fury of a dying star. Its weapons platforms could destroy entire fleets. For 500 years, no enemy had dared to attack it. The Scourge did not care about history. Admiral commanded the combined fleet that defended the station. He was a veteran of 100 battles, decorated with honors from a dozen grateful worlds. When the Scourge emerged from hyperspace, he felt a moment of cold terror that he quickly buried beneath years of training. All ships defensive formation, he ordered. Focus fire on the lead vessels. Do not let them reach the station. The battle began. At first, allowed himself to hope. The combined fleet was large and well-armed. His captains were experienced. They threw everything they had at the Scourge armada, filling space with fire and destruction. But the Scourge adapted. Every weapon the fleet used, the machines analyzed and countered. Energy beams that should have melted their hulls were absorbed and redirected. Missiles that should have torn them apart were shot down by defensive systems that learned and improved with each exchange. The Scourge ships pushed forward through the barrage, taking losses but never slowing. Within 2 hours, half of the combined fleet was destroyed. Admiral, his communications officer's voice cracked with panic. The outer defense ring has fallen. Scourge boarding pods are attaching to the station's hull. Watched his tactical display, watching ship after ship disappear as the Scourge overwhelmed them. On the station, millions of civilians were screaming, running, dying. Where are the reinforcements from the Council? He demanded. Delayed, Admiral. The Hegemony and the Concordat are negotiating terms of engagement. They cannot agree on command structure. Wanted to laugh. 12 million lives hung in the balance, and the Council was arguing about politics. All remaining ships fall back to the inner ring. Protect the evacuation transports. It was hopeless, and he knew it. There were not enough transports to evacuate even a fraction of the station's population. There were not enough ships to hold back the Scourge. In a few hours, Meridian Station would be nothing but wreckage and corpses. Then the sensors detected something impossible. Admiral, the tactical officer's voice rose with disbelief. Hyperspace signatures, hundreds of them, emerging at coordinates. Admiral, it's a human fleet. Turned to the main just as the first ships appeared. They were not the patrol vessels he remembered. These were warships, massive and angular, bristling with weapons systems that made his own ships look like toys. They emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, moving with a precision that took his breath away. A transmission cut through all frequencies, overriding every communication channel in the system. The voice was human, calm and confident. Meridian Station, this is Fleet Admiral of the United Human Confederacy vessel Defiance. We are not here for the Council. We are not here to make political statements. We are here because there are 12 million civilians on that station who are going to die if someone doesn't help them. The voice paused, and when it continued, there was iron beneath the calm. Scourge vessels, you have 30 seconds to withdraw. This is your only warning. If you remain, we will demonstrate what happens when humans stop being polite. The Scourge did not withdraw. Perhaps they did not understand the warning. Perhaps they believed they could adapt to human weapons as easily as they had adapted to everything else. They were wrong. The human fleet opened fire. Had seen many battles in his long career. He had watched fleets clash and worlds burn. He thought he understood warfare. He understood nothing. The human weapons were like nothing he had ever seen. They did not fire beams or missiles. They fired something else, something that made the Scourge ships simply come apart. One moment a machine vessel would be whole and deadly. The next moment it would dissolve into a cloud of glittering dust. And the weapons kept changing. Every few seconds the humans switched to a new type of attack. The Scourge tried to adapt, but they could not keep up. By the time their systems found a counter to one weapon, the humans were already using something different. The battle lasted 90 minutes. When it was over, the largest Scourge offensive in recorded history was nothing but debris. The human fleet had not lost a single ship. Admiral opened a communication channel to the Defiance. His hands were shaking. "Admiral," he said, his voice unsteady, "we are in your debt. I do not have words to express our gratitude. The Council will want to discuss." "The Council can discuss whatever it likes," interrupted. There was no anger in his voice, but no warmth either. "We will be gone within the hour. We came for the civilians, not for politics." But struggled to understand. Why, after everything that happened, after how we treated you, why would you come back? There was a long pause. When spoke again, his voice was softer. "Because someone had to. Because 12 million beings were going to die and we could prevent it. Because saving lives is not something we do for reward or recognition. It is simply who we are." Another pause. "We used to think that was enough, that our actions would speak for themselves, that eventually the galaxy would see us as partners rather than servants. We were wrong about that, but we were not wrong about the importance of helping those who need help." "Then you will return to the Council," could not keep the hope from his voice. "You will rejoin the Alliance." "No," the word was final. "We will not return to being your convenient helpers, called upon when you need us and dismissed when you do not. But neither will we stand by and watch innocent beings die." The human fleet began to turn, preparing to jump back to hyperspace. "If you face another crisis like this one," said, "we will come, not for the Council, not for thanks or recognition, for the people who need saving." "I do not understand," admitted. "You owe us nothing. We treated you with contempt. Why would you help us?" The answer came slowly, as if was choosing each word with care. "Because compassion is not a transaction. Because kindness does not require payment. Because the measure of a species is not how they treat those who can help them, but how they treat those who cannot." The communication channel closed. One by one, the human ships vanished into hyperspace, leaving the survivors of Meridian Station to stare at the space where they had been. Sat in his command chair for a long time, surrounded by the wreckage of his fleet and the impossible fact of his survival. The humans had saved them. The humans had come back, despite everything, and saved them. And then they had left again, asking for nothing. He did not understand, but for the first time he thought he wanted to. The diplomatic shuttle carried representatives from 312 species. It was the largest delegation in galactic history, and it was going to Earth to beg. The High Speaker sat at the front of the vessel, his ancient body wrapped in robes of mourning gray. He had ruled his people for 400 years. He had negotiated treaties with empires and ended wars with a word. He had never in his long life asked anyone for anything. Today, he would ask the humans for everything. The journey to Earth took 7 days. 7 days of silence as the delegates from dozens of worlds sat with their shame and their fear. 7 days of watching news reports about scourge advances, about worlds falling, about the slow collapse of everything they had built. When the shuttle finally approached Earth's solar system, the delegates gathered at the viewports to see what had become of humanity. They expected to find a broken people. Humanity had always spread itself thin across the galaxy, pouring resources into helping others. Without those obligations, perhaps they had withered and faded. Instead, they found a civilization transformed. Earth hung in space like a blue and green jewel, but it was surrounded by things that had not existed a year ago. Massive orbital stations circled the planet, their surfaces gleaming with lights and activity. Shipyards stretched for thousands of miles, producing vessels at a rate that made the delegates gasp. Defense platforms bristled with the same weapons that had destroyed the scourge at Meridian. In 1 year of isolation, humanity had flourished. They built all of this in 12 months. The ambassador could not keep the shock from her voice. How is that possible? The High Speaker said nothing. He was beginning to understand something terrible. For 300 years, humanity had devoted its energy to serving others. If this was what they could accomplish when they focused on themselves, what might they have achieved if the Council had treated them as partners instead of servants? What had the galaxy lost by driving them away? The shuttle landed in a city the humans called Geneva. It was a modest place by galactic standards, with no towering monuments or ostentatious displays of wealth. Just clean buildings and green parks and humans walking in the sunshine, living their lives without concern for the delegation that had come to beg their help. Chancellor met them in a building called Unity Hall. She looked older than she had a year ago, with more gray in her hair and deeper lines around her eyes. But she carried herself with the same quiet dignity that the High Speaker remembered from the day she had walked out of the council chamber. "High Speaker," she said, nodding to him, "delegates, welcome to Earth." "Chancellor," the High Speaker bowed low, lower than he had bowed to anyone in 4 centuries. "Thank you for receiving us." "You're here about the scourge." It was not a question. "Yes." The High Speaker felt the weight of his mission pressing down on him. "The scourge has taken 17 systems since the battle at Meridian. Our fleets are insufficient to stop them. Our defenses crumble wherever they attack. Without intervention, we estimate that the scourge will reach the core worlds within 2 years. He paused, forcing himself to say the words he had come to say. "We require humanity's assistance." Studied him with eyes that gave nothing away. "I see. And what does the Council offer in return?" The High Speaker had prepared for this question. He had spent the entire journey rehearsing his offer, calculating what humanity might want, what they might accept. "Whatever you wish," he said. "A permanent seat on the Council, 10 permanent seats, command of the combined fleet, territory, resources, name your price and we will pay it." For a long moment said nothing. Then she shook her head slowly. "We don't want seats," she said quietly. "We never wanted power over anyone. We wanted partnership. We wanted to be treated as equals, not as convenient servants to be called upon when needed and dismissed when not." The ambassador stepped forward, her skin flickering with colors of distress. Chancellor, please, we understand now. We were wrong to treat you as we did. We see that clearly. Do you? His voice was not harsh, but it was not warm either. When this crisis passes, will you remember this moment? Or will we become the useful primitives again, good enough to die for you but not good enough to sit beside you? The chamber fell silent. The delegates looked at each other, at the floor, at anything except the small human woman who was asking them to examine their souls. The High Speaker felt something break inside him. It was his pride, he realized. The pride of 400 years of ruling, of believing that his species was superior to all others, of knowing with absolute certainty that the young races were meant to serve the old. He had been wrong. He had been wrong about everything. Chancellor, he said, and his voice was the voice of an old man who had finally run out of excuses. I have ruled my people for 400 years. In all that time, I have never apologized for anything. I do so now. He lowered himself further until he was almost touching the floor. We were fools. We saw your compassion as weakness. We saw your service as subservience. We believed that because you were willing to help, you were obligated to help. We took everything you offered and gave you nothing but contempt in return. He raised his head to meet her eyes. I cannot speak for the entire council, but I can speak for myself and for my people. We were wrong, deeply, completely, shamefully wrong, and I do not ask you to forget that or to pretend that it did not happen. I only ask that you give us the chance to prove that we have learned. Looked at him for a long time. The silence stretched until it became painful. Stand up, she said finally. The High Speaker rose on legs that trembled with age and emotion. The Confederacy will convene to discuss your request, said, but I will tell you what I am going to recommend. She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the fine lines around her eyes, the gray in her hair, the weight of responsibility that she carried. I am going to recommend that we help you, not because you finally respect us, not because you have apologized, not because you have offered us power or territory or recognition. Then why? The High Speaker could not understand. After everything that had happened, after all the insults and rejections and contempt, why would they help? Smiled, and for the first time there was warmth in it. Because that is who we are. We help, we save, we protect. Not because we expect something in return, but because we cannot stand by and watch others suffer when we have the power to prevent it. She extended her hand toward him. It was a human gesture, one that his species had never bothered to learn. That is our strength, she said. Not our ships or our weapons or our technology. Our strength is that we care, even when caring costs us everything. Even when the beings we help have treated us with nothing but scorn. The High Speaker looked at her hand. Such a small gesture, such a simple thing. He took it. I do not deserve this kindness, he said quietly. No, agreed. You do not, but that is the point of kindness. It is not given because it is deserved. It is given because it is needed. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. Go back to your ships. Tell the council that humanity will fight beside them. Tell them that we will teach them how to defeat the scourge. Tell them that when this war is over, we will help them build something better than what came before. She turned to address all the delegates. But tell them this as well. We are not coming back as servants. We are coming back as partners or not at all. The choice is yours. The High Speaker bowed one final time. We choose partnership, he said, and we will spend however long it takes proving that we mean it. For the first time since he had arrived on Earth, smiled with genuine warmth. Then let's get to work. The Second Scourge War lasted 3 years. It was the bloodiest conflict in galactic history. Billions of beings died on 100 worlds. Fleets that had taken centuries to build were destroyed in hours. Stars that had burned since the beginning of time were extinguished by weapons that should never have existed. But humanity did not fight alone. From the first day of the war, the humans insisted on integration. They would not accept a role as the galaxy's protectors, rushing from crisis to crisis while other species watched from safety. Instead, they trained alien crews to use their weapons. They shared technology that they had kept secret for generations. They stood side by side with beings who had mocked them, fighting and dying together. It was hard at first. Many species did not want human commanders giving them orders. Many humans did not trust allies who had betrayed them before. Old prejudices and old wounds made cooperation difficult. But war has a way of burning away the things that do not matter. By the second year, the integrated fleets were fighting as one. Soldiers learned to trust human tactics. Human engineers learned to respect science. Species that had been enemies found common cause against a common enemy. And slowly, impossibly, they began to win. The turning point came at the Battle of the Veil, where the Scourge had built their largest nexus, the heart of their machine intelligence. It was protected by a fleet of 10,000 vessels and defensive systems that had never been breached. The Allied fleet that gathered to attack it was the largest ever assembled. Ships from 400 species flew in formation, their crews united by purpose and by hope. At the center of the formation flew the human flagship Defiance, Admiral commanding. The battle lasted 3 days. On the first day, the Allied fleet breached the outer defenses, suffering terrible losses but pushing forward. On the second day, they reached the Nexus itself, only to find that the Scourge had been hiding their true strength. Fresh machine ships poured out of hidden bases, threatening to overwhelm the attackers. On the third day, with the battle hanging in the balance, Admiral made a decision. "All ships cover the Defiance," he ordered. "We're going to end this." The Allied fleet formed a protective wall around the human flagship as it pushed toward the Nexus. Ships from every species in the galaxy threw themselves into the path of Scourge weapons, sacrificing themselves so that the Defiance could reach its target. When the flagship finally reached the Nexus, himself led the boarding party. They fought through corridors filled with machine defenders, losing crew members with every step. By the time they reached the central chamber, only a handful of humans remained alive. The Nexus core was a massive sphere of pulsing energy, the brain of the entire Scourge collective. Looked at it, then at the detonator in his hand. "For everyone we've lost," he said quietly, "and for everyone we might yet save." He pressed the button. The explosion was visible from 1,000 light-years away. When the war ended, the galaxy was changed forever. The old Galactic Council was dissolved by unanimous vote. In its place rose the Galactic Confederation, a new body built on principles that humanity had championed from the beginning. Every species had equal representation, regardless of age or power. Every member was expected to contribute to the common good, and at the heart of the new order was a simple idea that had once seemed naive. Compassion was not weakness, it was the greatest strength of all. Chancellor, now old and tired but still unbowed, delivered the opening address to the First Confederation Assembly. 300 years ago, she said, her voice carrying across the vast chamber, humanity came to the stars hopping to find friends. We found something else instead. We found ancient civilizations that had forgotten why civilizations exist in the first place. We found species so focused on their own power that they could not see the value of those they considered beneath them. She paused, looking out at the thousands of delegates who had gathered. Many of them had fought beside humans in the war. Many had lost friends and family in battles where humans had died to save them. "We did not leave the council because we were angry," she continued. "We left because we needed you to see what the galaxy looked like without us. Not to punish you, but to help you remember something that you had forgotten. We are stronger together. We always were." In the gallery above the main floor, an old watched the ceremony. He was no longer the High Speaker. He had given up that title voluntarily, the first of his kind to ever surrender power rather than cling to it until death. Now he was simply Os, a private citizen who had spent his final years in office fighting for the reforms that made this moment possible. A small human child sat beside him. Her name was Maria, and she was the granddaughter of a human soldier who had served under Os during the war. When her grandfather had died in the Battle of the Veil, Os had sought out his family and offered to help in any way he could. It was a small gesture, an attempt to repay a debt that could never truly be repaid. Now, 3 years later, Maria called him grandfather and held his hand during long ceremonies and asked him questions that made him think about things he had never considered before. "Grandfather Os," she said, tugging at his robe, "why are you crying?" He looked down at her with all 6 of his eyes. She was so small, so young, so completely unafraid of the alien creature beside her. To her, he was simply grandfather, a member of her family, someone she loved. "Because I am old," he said, "and I have finally learned something new." "What did you learn?" Os considered the question. He thought about the centuries he had spent believing that his species was superior to all others. He thought about the vote that had driven humanity away and the year of darkness that had followed. He thought about the war and the humans who had come back to save those who had wronged them. He thought about extending her hand to him, offering kindness that he did not deserve. "I learned that the smallest species in the galaxy had the largest hearts," he said. "And I learned that we almost lost them because we were too proud to see their value." Maria nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense. Then she smiled and squeezed his hand. "I'm glad you learned," she said. "Learning is good." Below them was finishing her speech. "Today we begin something new," she said. "Not a council of masters and servants, but a confederation of equals. Not an alliance of convenience, but a family of choice. We will face challenges ahead. We will make mistakes. We will sometimes fail each other." She straightened her shoulders, and her voice rang with conviction. "But we will face those challenges together. We will learn from our mistakes together. And when we fail, we will lift each other up and try again. Because that is what family does. That is what partnership means." She raised her hand in a gesture that had become the symbol of the new confederation. Around the chamber, thousands of beings from hundreds of species raised their hands as well. "Welcome to the new galaxy," said. "Let's build it together." The cheering began and did not stop for a long time. Os sat in the gallery, holding a human child's hand, watching a future he had never imagined unfold. The humans had returned, and they had brought with them something that the ancient species had forgotten existed: hope. The galaxy would never be the same, and for the first time in 400 years, Os was grateful to be alive to see it. Outside the great chamber, the stars burned on as they had for billions of years, but now they seemed brighter somehow, as if they too knew that something had changed. The universe was vast and cold and full of dangers, but it was no longer alone. And somewhere in the heart of human space, in a small house on a small planet orbiting an ordinary star, great were learning a song that children had sung since the beginning of human history. It was a song about the stars, about the dreams of those who looked up at them, about the hope that somewhere out there in the infinite darkness there were others who wanted to be friends. The humans had found those others at last, and in finding them, they had changed everything. The universe would remember this moment. The scholars would write about it for to come. They would call it many things. But the children of the galaxy would always know it by its simplest name: the day the universe learned to be kind.